U.S. Embassy in Baghdad urges Americans to avoid travel to Iraq over security threats. Egypt's foreign minister stresses need for comprehensive settlement to the war in Gaza. And Indian Airlines plane with 242 passengers crashes seconds after takeoff.
Donald Trump is his name, and he's there to stay.
As unlikely, impossible is now reality.
America powerful. We will win, win, win. And we will make America great again. We will very quickly make America great again.
Good afternoon, you're watching Q News. I'm Mark Summers. The U.S. Embassy in Baghdad has urged Americans not to travel to Iraq, citing serious security threats. In a security alert, the U.S. Embassy warned of heightened risks to American citizens in Iraq, including violence, kidnappings, and attacks involving IEDs and drones. The warning notes that these threats are present even in major cities and are being carried out by groups hostile to the United States. The advisory comes amid rising regional tensions and renewed concerns over American safety in the country. The U.S. State Department has announced a staff reduction at its embassy in Baghdad. In a statement, the department confirmed the Pentagon is ready to evacuate embassy personnel if needed. The U.S. travel warning for Iraq remains at level 4, the highest level, due to serious security threats.
And that's pretty bad. It's the wrong philosophy.
The U.S. Embassy in Bahrain has dismissed reports of changes to its operations. In an official statement, the embassy said its staff and operations remain unchanged and activities are continuing as usual. The clarification follows President Trump's announcement of a U.S. staff withdrawal from the Middle East. The U.S. has restricted government staff movements in Israel amid rising regional tensions. The U.S. Embassy in Israel announced that employees and their families are prohibited from leaving the Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and Beersheba areas until further notice. The move comes amid escalating tensions across the region. A Houthi official says the group is on high alert for possible U.S. action in Yemen. The U.S. media cited the official warning that any escalation would be against Iran, would destabilize the region and drag it into war. He said it's not in Washington's interest to start a new conflict for Israel and confirmed a readiness to escalate attacks against Israel. Now we go across to our newsroom where Rana is there for us. Rana.
Thank you so much, Mark. And for more analysis on this, we're joined by Mohammed Abu Shema, Director of the Strategic Forum for Thought Dialogue, speaking to us in Cairo. Welcome, sir, to Q News. Sir, what specific threats have triggered the latest U.S. Embassy warning in Baghdad, and how credible are these risks today compared to previous years?
In the outset, greetings to you and your viewers. There is no doubt that the situation in the Middle East is escalating complexity and tensions due to the reactions between Israel and Iran in light of the negotiations between the U.S. and Iran into the some sort of failure, even coming round due to be held in Oman, but the resolution of IAEA that condemned Iran in a way or another, and the escalations between Iran, Israel, and U.S. It seems that the situation in the Middle East at the brink of chaos, and even the measurement by the U.S. to minimize its diplomatic personnel in some countries, on top of which is the U.S. embassy in Iraq and other Gulf area countries. That alarms that a matter is coming, that most probably that Israel to strike some portions of nuclear reactors of Iran and disrupt its capabilities of manufacturing nuclear bombs, as Iran and the U.S. are very much concerned for such escalating nuclear potentials of Iran. So that's why the number been diminished, and to do so, if Israel may make a strike to the nuclear facilities in Iran, it will be faced a retaliation by Iran, and the most goals that Iran is reaching is the American bases in Iraq, as we've seen on the past 2 years, that led the crisis of October 7 war or striking but some of the American bases in Iraq previously, in light of the continued escalation between Iran and the U.S.
Got your point, sir. Sir, how do current regional tensions involving Iran, Israel, and Yemen factor into the security calculus for American personnel and interests in Iraq, sir? Sir, how do current regional tensions involving Iran, Israel, and Yemen factor into the security calculus for American personnel and interests in Iraq, sir?
In fact, the regional conflict between Iran and Israel, that its factors are scattered in the region, and its attitudes are very tangled and related, started by Gaza region to Gaza, Lebanon, and Yemen and Iraq. All these fights are in the corner of negotiation between the Israeli-Iranian side, and as we've noted previously, that there is some sort of a mediation, Iranian mediation between Israel, and it is very much present in what's happening in Yemen concerning the escalation between the Houthis and Israel, and the repeated Israeli strikes to disrupt the Houthis missiles into Israel. That, of course, casts a light in the escalation throughout the region's dossiers. And maybe this would represent the tensions or the beginning of retaliation between Iran and Israel, or to have Israel striking the nuclear facilities in Iran. So that would trigger all the armed factions in Iraq to do some sort of escalation, and again against Israel. They all are very much related, and the escalation that was cleared previously, that would alarm that something would be happening in the Middle East, and there is a very close concern of happening, and most probably is Israel to strike Iran. militarily.
Okay, sir, we got this point. What are the implications of a potential U.S. embassy evacuation in Baghdad for Iraq's stability and U.S. diplomatic leverage in the region at this point, sir?
There's no doubt that what has been reportedly but withdrawing the U.S. diplomatic personnel in the U.S. embassy in Iraq that have triggered a great tension and too much concern, particularly in the Gulf areas and Iraq in particular, and made the regions in full alert, as I've already noted or indicated that something might be happening in Iraq, and highlighting in Iraq that will be a potential target to Iran in case of Israel to strike the nuclear facilities. And the escalation started in the political discourse, whether from the U.S. administration or Iran or in Israel, that was most notably that would affect the future stability in the region, that would seems to some sort of expectations of military actions and quite soon in the Middle East, specifically near Iraq and Iran mainly, that reflected such move. And there is another analysis.
Sir, you highlighted on this point, and this takes us to another question, which is how might the United States military posture in the Middle East shift if hostilities involving Iran or its proxies escalate further?
Just to complete such a point, that there is another vision that is all sort of escalation of withdrawing personnel and the rhetoric or the political discourse to represent a last American pressure against Iran in order to respond through the next round between US and Iran and Oman in reaching a deal to dismantle in a way or another the nuclear program of Iran, which is this suggestion is a way far, and in avoiding military action in case of such escalations, what has been led of Iran's proxies, that as we know that we are in a very weakened conditions, we're talking about in Hezbollah in Lebanon too, that they have no impact in confronting Israel in Beirut. It's only a few missiles launched by the Houthis in central areas in Tel Aviv that only affected the morals within Israel. Otherwise, we do not notice any movement. But maybe some sort of confrontation in Iraq in case of any sort of aggression by the three countries strangled in such a file. In case of the freezing and tension situation, but all the matters alarms that we are awaiting of something would happen in the Middle East in the upcoming hours.
Okay, sir. That was Mohammed Aboushema, Director of the Strategic Forum for Thought Dialogue, joining us from Cairo. Thank you very much for your valuable knowledge and informative insights, sir. Now we will go back to Mark in our studios. Mark?
Rana Alcasas there, Rana in our studio. Thank you, Rana. Now, let's get the latest developments in Gaza. Palestinian medical sources say 52 people were killed by Israeli fire across Gaza today. Among the dead were 24 civilians reportedly targeted near aid distribution centers. Gaza's health ministry says over 250 people have been killed and almost 2,000 injured since Israeli strikes intensified on May 27th.
Egypt's
Foreign ministers stressed the need for a comprehensive settlement to the war in Gaza. In a call with U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff, FM Abdelatty discussed joint efforts by Egypt, the U.S. and Qatar to secure a Gaza ceasefire. He also highlighted the importance of U.S.-Iran negotiations continuing. The UN General Assembly is set to vote today on a Gaza ceasefire resolution. The draft resolution demands an immediate and unconditional ceasefire in Gaza. The General Assembly has passed similar resolutions in 2023, but Israel has not responded. Today's vote is seen as another test of global consensus amid the ongoing humanitarian concerns. UNRWA says it has lost all contact with its staff in Gaza, the first time this has happened in months. In a post on its official X account, the UN agency said it did not receive the usual morning check-in messages from its team in Gaza. These daily updates typically confirm staff safety and whereabouts. The sudden silence raises deep concerns amid the continued hostilities and worsening humanitarian conditions in the Strip.
A secure environment within Gaza and faster facilitation of permissions.
Meanwhile, UNRWA's chief says the U.S. aid system in Gaza won't solve growing hunger. Felipe Lazzarini said so-called Hunger Games must not become the new norm. He urged safe humanitarian access, adding the UN has the expertise and trust to provide dignified aid to civilians in Gaza. Sweden's foreign minister says Israel's actions in Gaza may constitute war crimes. Maria Malmö Stenengard condemned Israel's refusal to allow aid into Gaza and attacks on aid centers, saying it amounts to deliberately starving civilians. She called for urgent access to food, water and medicine for Gazans. All internet and fixed-line communication services have been completely cut off in Gaza. The Palestinian Telecommunications Regulatory Authority says all internet and landline networks in Gaza have gone down after the last remaining main fiber optic route was hit. This follows 2 days of service disruptions in Gaza City and the north amid continued Israeli airstrikes on the enclave. Israel's parliament has rejected a preliminary vote to dissolve itself. The Knesset voted 61 to 53 against the motion, which could have paved the way for early elections, an outcome that polls suggest would threaten Prime Minister Netanyahu's position. The vote follows a resolution in a dispute over military conscription and gives Netanyahu's coalition more time to weather its internal crisis amid the ongoing war in Gaza. And from the war on Gaza to the dispute in Iran, where US President Donald Trump says he's open to extending a July 8th deadline for trade talks before higher tariffs kick in, though he doesn't expect it will be needed. Speaking to reporters ahead of a performance of Les Miserables at the Kennedy Center, President Trump said negotiations are ongoing with around 15 countries. Those include key partners like South Korea, Japan and the European Union. The talks aim to avoid a new round of US tariff hikes set to take effect next month.
And we're going to do very well with it, and hopefully they are too.
Personnel are being moved out of the region within
Now, CNN reports that Israel is on high alert and preparing for a possible military operation against Iran. This news coming from US officials. The report comes as Washington reduces staff at its embassy in Baghdad, citing security concerns. US President Donald Trump confirmed the move, which follows threats from Iran to target American bases in the region if conflict breaks out. The rising tension underscores fears of a wider confrontation in the Middle East. Iran's defense minister says a missile test carrying a 2-ton warhead has been successfully completed, warning enemies their threats won't go unanswered. Brigadier General Aziz Nazirzadeh confirmed the missile test and said Iran's operational forces are fully equipped to respond to any threat. His remarks follow heightened regional tensions, with Iran vowing retaliation against hostile moves. The test signals a show of force as Tehran follows growing pressure from Western and regional rivals. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says there's strong evidence Iran is advancing toward developing a nuclear weapon. Speaking during a congressional hearing, Hegseth said the U.S. has numerous indications of Iran's progress towards what he described as a nuclear weapon. In response to Senator Lindsey Graham, Hegseth added that Israel considers the threat existential and would act accordingly. His comment highlighted growing alarm over Tehran's nuclear ambitions.
So the answer is yes. The execution of their job, the answer is yes. In the city of Los Angeles. Your whole.
Now to a tragic story today. Indian Airlines announced that one of its planes carrying 242 passengers crashed just seconds after takeoff. The flight was scheduled to depart from Ahmedabad in India to the United Kingdom. Local television footage showed smoke rising from the crash site near Ahmedabad Airport in the state of Gujarat. Indian police say more than 100 bodies were recovered from the crash site. The Indian Airlines flight crashed shortly after takeoff from Ahmedabad en route to the United Kingdom. Authorities say over 100 bodies have been moved to local hospitals. The crash site near Ahmedabad Airport was seen engulfed in smoke. Rescue efforts are ongoing. Ahmedabad police say no one survived the Air India flight to London. The aircraft bound for London's Gatwick Airport crashed in a residential area shortly after takeoff. Police say there are expected to be no survivors among the 240-plus people on board. Air India confirmed the flight's route as rescue teams continue work at the crash site. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi described the crash of the Air India passenger plane in the city of Ahmedabad as undescribably, heartbreakingly tragedy. Modi expressed deep sorrow over the Ahmedabad disaster, extending his heartfelt condolences to the victims. He stated that he has been in contact with ministers and relevant authorities to ensure assistance is provided to those affected by the crash. Now, just before we go, let's recap the main headlines this afternoon. U.S. Embassy in Baghdad urges Americans to avoid travel to Iraq over security threats. Egypt's foreign minister stresses need for comprehensive settlement to the war in Gaza. And as we were just hearing, Indian Airlines has reported that a plane with 242 passengers has crashed seconds after takeoff. And that's all for our bulletin this hour. Don't forget to follow us on our social media platforms on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at Qnews EGY. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.